hopefully we can tackle some of those regular questions that people have, because anytime somebody's jumping into importing from Japan, there's just a pile of questions that most people seem to have for their first import. So maybe we can rifle through a few of those and hopefully put some people's minds at ease. So in Canada, they have to be 15 years old, and that's got to be to the month of manufacture. So now we're at the end of January, so technically something that would be a February manufacture month of 2009 could clear through customs, but we could have shipped it a couple months ago, because it can still leave Japan and be en route prior to, as long as we don't clear it through customs till it's exactly 15 years old. Now, Quebec and PEI have done their own thing, and in those provinces, it's got to be 25 years and older, just like it is in the United States. Insurance varies from province to province. The worst province for insurance would be Ontario. It is private insurance in Ontario, but they are allowed to refuse insurance, where they can't do that in Alberta. They have to at least give you PLPD, or basic liability insurance, in Alberta. In Ontario, the private insurers can just say no. So a lot of them have banded together and just said no. There are a few options, and we can always give a recommendation for a broker in Ontario if people need it. But some places will say either we can't, or it would just be a company called Facility, or one other company, and it's like unbelievable $600-700 a month sometimes. So Ontario is challenging, but you can navigate it. It's a lot easier in Alberta, and then in other provinces like Saskatchewan, BC, and Manitoba, where it's public, you can easily get it actually for pretty cheap just through the provincial insurance company. Yeah, so it's going to vary quite a bit from vehicle to vehicle, but you'll see a lot of Japanese vehicles that maybe they have a different name, but they're pretty much a sister vehicle to something sold for the North American market. So oftentimes you can just look up parts for that comparable vehicle for the North American market. There are ones like Nissan Skylines or the K-Trucks where they only made those for the Japanese market. And for those, it's going to be a little bit more involved to get parts. You're going to have to find them online, or if you got your vehicle through us, we can get you parts at cost. We can just send your chassis number, your VIN number to our guys in Japan, and air shipping doesn't take as long as the vehicle takes to get here. You can, as long as it's not too heavy of a part, you can air ship it with DHL in less than a week. So it's not terribly difficult. And of course, there's some parts selling companies like Rocky Mountain Parts Imports would be a pretty good one. Even right drive parts in Ontario is decent as well. Look, like there's no secrets in the import business. When it comes to stuff in Japan, a bunch of importers can get their hands on it. Like, we all have access to the same stuff. I mean, we say we have access to everything, or all the cars in Japan, and I truly think we do, but most importers would be able to get their hands on most vehicles. It's all available to anybody in Canada or any other country globally, really. So if it's listed with another supplier or importer in Canada for a lower price, we'll always match it and try to exceed the service and take good care of you as well. And then same thing for the import brokerage fee. If we're sourcing something from auction, we'll always match another Canadian importer. So there's two ways that people do business with us, and we try to set it out on the site pretty efficiently. Essentially, either you're going to look at the stuff in Japan stock inventory, and you're going to select something there, and if everything looks good, you can order that, or you're going to go the other way, and we'll custom order something and hunt daily for options from the Japan auctions or dealers. So it's a pretty even split on how we do it. I mean, the wait time to get something out of Japan is pretty extensive. So some people, if they see something that pretty much hits all the ticks all the boxes of what they want, they'll say, you know what, I'll just get that. I'll save the time, and instead of hunting in the auctions, I'll just go with that unit. Now, if somebody wants something specific and they don't see it listed on our site, they'll say, okay, you know, for example, I want to get a Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 5, you don't have one listed on your website, or maybe you do, but it's not exactly what I want. We would set up a custom order. So it'd be $1,000 deposit. And then you'd also fill out a quick form, and we'd hunt daily for options for you. And anything that's of interest, we'll translate the inspection sheet, get as much information as we can. And ultimately we can bid on it up to whatever max you want to go up to. I'd say, depending on the customer's budget, usually you have to bid on several units before successfully getting something good in budget. But we'll never rush you along. We want to make sure that you get something you're going to be happy with if you're going to the trouble of doing a custom order anyway. When the vehicle goes through the intake process at the auction, someone at the auction house is looking at it, starting it up, looking underneath, seeing if there's any weird noises or leaks or smoke or rust or anything. If you compare that to getting something from a dealership in Japan, the dealership is a little bit biased. And if they're doing something for export, they're just going to give you information and they want to sell the vehicle. And from an auction house, you have that auction sheet done by the auction house. Now, we always take it a step further than that and get a second check done. So there's essentially about 100 auctions scattered across Japan. It's not feasible to send somebody to each auction house for every customer bid that we have. But there's a company in Japan that has a few staff at each auction house, and we pay them a flat fee. We don't even end up billing that to our customers, but we pay them a flat fee to go and take a look at any vehicle that we're going to be bidding on. And if there's any concerns on that second check, we'll cancel the bid. So they check again to make sure that there's no rust or major issues, mechanical issues or anything that was missed on the auction sheet. And frankly, we probably skip about 30-40% of the units based on the results from the second check. Yeah, a lot of importers don't do that because, well, obviously it leads to less sales and a more arduous hunting time if you're canceling that many units. But it keeps the customers happy because they're not going to get something and have surprises. It's a smaller country with a big population, and Tokyo is actually the biggest metropolitan area in the world. There's about 35 million people there. And I usually go to Tokyo every year, and I notice to get from point A to point B within Tokyo, it's just way faster to take public transit than it would be to drive. There's so much traffic. Finding parking is next to impossible. So you might spend a third of the time just using their efficient train system to get from point A to B, but maybe you still want a vehicle just for that odd time that you need to go out of the city or go somewhere and take some luggage or something like that. So it's especially common to have very low kilometer vehicles in Tokyo. That and a vehicle often for Japanese people is like a status symbol. So you may have it, but it may not be as much for the utility purpose as it would be for us here. We need it to get to our jobs and things like that. So it's very common to have vehicles under 50,000 kilometers there for sure. Fuel is quite a bit more pricey in Japan, and there's toll bridges everywhere. So people probably consider the cost of going somewhere a little bit more than they would here. Japan is the biggest exporter of used cars in the world. People have caught on to the fact that the value is really good in Japan. That's why I've been doing my business for so long. And a few reasons for that. Number one would be Japan has Toyota, Nissan, Subaru, Mitsubishi, lots of manufacturers there. And the Japanese government gives them tax incentives to buy new. So I've heard it said that the average Japanese person gets a brand new vehicle every 2 years. So those used vehicles have to go somewhere. There's more of a market for the new vehicles. And as vehicles age, they have to pass regular inspections that get quite expensive to keep the vehicles on the road. It's called a shaken inspection. And oftentimes the cost to pass that inspection just doesn't make sense for people to have an older vehicle anymore. So the market in Japan is really weak for these older vehicles, hence why they get sent to auction for people overseas to bid on them. And as I was mentioning before, for a lot of people, it's a status symbol. So having an older vehicle might just not be worth the purchase for them when they have the option to potentially buy a new one and get something that's to them a little bit more respectable. And Japanese people culturally and this is a big generalization, but generally they'll take care of their things. They're not just gonna leave them to get derelict and become in bad shape. They'll take care of their stuff, and they kind of have to with that inspection requirement that they have to pass on older vehicles every 2 years. They're required to do that if they want to keep the registration active. So generally, over the past decade, we've always said around 6 weeks. Now, over the past year, it's definitely been a lot worse than that. There's just been too much demand for roll-on, roll-off shipping. And by the way, the vehicles by default ship roll-on, roll-off. So they're driven onto the boats, driven off the boats, and it's kind of like a massive underground parking garage like you might see at a big mall. In there, they're individually strapped down. That's how all the new vehicles ship from Japan to Canada as well. There's been a shortage of those boats and just too much demand for that kind of shipping. So it's been difficult to get reliable timelines, and in some cases, it's been taking a lot longer than normal this year. Generally, I would say right now about 3 months. Now we are going to be in 2024 offering a container shipping service. We're just finishing all the details of nailing that process down to make. Years ago, I was able to ship roll-on, roll-off to Halifax. Now they closed that option at the Halifax port, and everything for the East Coast, all the Maritimes, it's got to go by train from Vancouver to Halifax. That's $2,400 roughly. So we're going to be, and I've already done a couple test containers. We're going to be able to offer that tentatively starting maybe Q2 of 2024. And then the nice thing is that when there's periods of instability with roll-on, roll-off shipping, even just to Vancouver, where it's taking a good period of time, people will be able to elect just to do container instead. So we're going to always have that option. And roll-on, roll-off will normalize. I think NYK is supposedly putting another boat in the water this year as well. So things will normalize with roll-on, roll-off. But just because it can be unpredictable and sometimes it can take too long, we want to have a solid container option to offer people. So that'll be in the works, and we'll have something on the website and a news bulletin about that sometime this year. Everything is shipped with ICCA insurance, which is the highest insurance that you can have. And it's going to cover total loss, piracy, things like that, I mean, knock on wood, I've never had to deal with, and it's not a common occurrence, but it's also going to cover damage to the vehicle. So if the bumper gets hit loading on or off the ramps for the roll-on, roll-off boats, we'll have insurance for that. Same with container shipping. Container shipping has a few more variables, like you're stacking vehicles as efficiently as you can to fill the can as best you can. We have some really good partners for loading and unloading, so it's quite safe. But again, we have insurance for that as well. And for customers that don't live in a port city, if we're shipping to Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg, Toronto, if it's shipping by truck or by rail from the port, it's always fully insured for that too. So you never want that to happen, but it's more for the peace of mind for the customer, so they don't have to be anxious about it at all.